This isn't a conspiracy. These people do not fit in that space.
Prince Andrew was like, let's dance together, and I was like, okay. And
do you remember her?
No. I have no recollection of ever meeting her.
The brother of the current king, the second son of our late Queen Elizabeth.
I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that even royalty were involved.
Who put Geoffrey up to this? Who told him to set Prince Andrew up?
The reason why I will always refer to Andrew as Prince Andrew. As much as the royal family can try and take themselves away from him, stories like this show that they did not take action sooner.
A member of the British royal family has just been arrested. Police are currently searching properties on the King's own estate. And there are now 9 separate investigations underway that could drag King Charles himself into a courtroom. What's unfolding right now in Britain hasn't happened in 90 years, and the last time something even close to this occurred, a king lost his throne. So let's break down exactly what's happening, why it matters, and where this is all heading, because the implications are genuinely staggering. Let's start with the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. Prince Andrew, the King's own brother, is now at the center of 9 active police investigations. 9. These aren't minor inquiries. They involve allegations of connections to Jeffrey Epstein's network, potential involvement in activities that authorities are taking extremely seriously. Former British Prime Minister Gordon Brown has personally submitted a 5-page memorandum to multiple police departments detailing concerns about the so-called Lolita Express and how it may have been used to transport women to royal properties. A former Prime Minister felt compelled to put this in writing and hand it to law enforcement. That alone should tell you how serious this has become. But here's where things get truly unprecedented. Right now, as this story develops, there are 2 separate teams of police officers physically searching royal properties. One team is at Wood Farm on the Sandringham estate, which is where Charles relocated Andrew, and which previously served as the residence of the late Prince Philip. The other team is at Royal Lodge in Windsor, Andrew's former home, sitting just a couple of miles from where Prince William and Catherine live with their children. Police searching the King's own property. Let that sink in for a moment. Now, the immediate arrest concerns the alleged disclosure of British state secrets to Jeffrey Epstein, a man who had absolutely no authorization to receive them. But that's really just the surface layer of a much deeper and much more disturbing story. Because lurking beneath all of this are the long-standing allegations involving Virginia, formerly Virginia Roberts, who has maintained for years that she was trafficked by Epstein's operation when she was just 17 years old.
I was so young. Ghislaine woke me up in the morning and said, you're gonna meet a prince today. That night, Prince Andrew came to her house in London. Prince Andrew was like, let's dance together, and I was like, okay. And Prince Andrew got me alcohol. It was in the VIP section, and Ghislaine said he's coming back to the house. I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that even royalty were involved.
She has consistently stated that one of the men she was provided to was Prince Andrew, and that what happened between them was not consensual on her part. She was a minor, and this is where the documentary evidence becomes devastating for Andrew. There's a well-known photograph showing Andrew with his arm around Virginia, with Ghislaine Maxwell visible in the background. Andrew famously claimed this photograph was fabricated. He went even further in his now infamous interview with BBC Newsnight back in 2019, where he delivered what can only be described as one of the least convincing denials in television history. When asked directly about Virginia's account of meeting him, dining with him, dancing with him at a London nightclub, and then being taken to Maxwell's home in Belgravia, Andrew responded with extraordinary vagueness. He said he had no recollection of ever meeting her. He said he was almost convinced he was never at the venue she described. He claimed he didn't know where the bar was in the nightclub and that he didn't think he'd ever bought a drink there. Not a single firm denial, not one definitive that never happened. Just hedging, qualifying, and distancing language that anyone with basic instincts about truthfulness would find deeply troubling. And now we know why he was so careful with his words. Because correspondence that has since emerged from the Epstein files tells a very different story. Communications between Andrew's team, Ghislaine Maxwell, and Epstein reveal that they privately acknowledged the photograph was genuine. There are exchanges between Epstein and a New York Times reporter in which the reporter characterizes what happened between Andrew and Virginia as consensual, framing it as Andrew's problem rather than Epstein's. And critically, Epstein's response to this characterization was not to deny that anything happened. He simply said nothing to contradict it. The silence speaks volumes. There's more. Additional photographic evidence has surfaced, showing Andrew positioned over a young woman, her face censored, in what appears to be a compromising situation.
Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. It's an extraordinary, extraordinary revelation.
And the correspondence between Andrew and Epstein includes discussions about arranging encounters for the prince. This wasn't a casual acquaintance. This was an active, ongoing relationship with a convicted offender. And here's what makes Andrew's Newsnight interview even more damning in retrospect. He told the interviewer that he had cut off contact with Epstein after those photographs emerged of the two of them walking together in Central Park in New York. Those photos, first published back in 2011, showed Andrew visiting Epstein after Epstein had already pleaded guilty to soliciting a minor. Andrew visited him, stayed at his New York residence, with royal protection officers present, meaning the British security apparatus was fully aware of where Andrew was and who he was with. But the claim that he cut ties after that, completely false. Email records show Andrew continued communicating with Epstein well after that point. And disturbingly, some of those communications included Andrew sending photographs of his own daughters, Beatrice and Eugenie, who were in their late teens and early 20s at the time, to a man who had been convicted of offences involving minors. The implications of that are almost too dark to process. And Andrew wasn't the only family member maintaining this relationship. His ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, Fergie, had extensive correspondence with Epstein. She reportedly had a close personal relationship with him that some sources suggest may have been intimate. She brought her daughters to stay with Epstein after his release from what was technically incarceration, though in practice it involved daytime release to his office. Neither Andrew nor Fergie showed any apparent concern about the nature of Epstein's conviction. And in one particularly disturbing piece of correspondence, Fergie reportedly discussed her youngest daughter, Eugenie, going on what she casually described as a shagging weekend. This language, directed at or shared with a convicted offender, raises questions that investigators are now actively pursuing, which brings us to the present danger for the monarchy itself. New reporting indicates that Beatrice and Eugenie may be questioned under caution by police. Fergie may face the same, and Andrew, who still holds his place as eighth in line to the British throne, remains in the line of succession despite everything. Both princesses still carry their royal titles. King Charles made the decision to let them keep those titles, just as he made the decision to bring Andrew back into public royal life after the late Queen Elizabeth had firmly banished him. And this is the critical point that could determine the future of the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth, despite her deep personal love for Andrew and her reported belief in his innocence, had taken decisive action. She stripped him of his titles. She removed him from royal duties. She effectively erased him from the public face of the institution. But when Charles took over, operating first as regent while his mother battled terminal cancer, and then as king, he reversed course. He allowed Andrew to attend Christmas at Sandringham, the single biggest photo opportunity of the royal year. He permitted Fergie to accompany him. He sent Andrew and Fergie as the most senior royal representatives to memorial services. Charles believed in forgiveness. He wanted to rehabilitate his brother, and that decision now threatens to consume his entire reign. Because here's the scenario that constitutional experts and royal watchers are genuinely worried about. Andrew is almost certainly not going to plead guilty to anything. He's not that type of person, and the British legal system doesn't really offer the kind of plea deals that exist in America. There's very little incentive for him to cooperate. So if this goes to trial, and the trajectory suggests it will, Andrew's defense could very well involve dragging Charles directly into the proceedings. He could testify that Charles knew about certain arrangements. He could point to the reported payment of £12 million to Virginia as something Charles authorized. Recent reporting has indicated that Charles was involved in signing off on significant financial settlements. And if Andrew puts his brother on the witness stand, either literally or figuratively, the constitutional crisis becomes immediate and potentially fatal for Charles's reign. In the United Kingdom, there is exactly one person who cannot be charged with a crime, and that is the reigning monarch. If the king becomes entangled in legal proceedings through his brother's defense, the entire judicial process could collapse, just as it did roughly 20 years ago, when Princess Diana's former butler was charged with theft and immediately invoked Queen Elizabeth as a witness, causing the trial to fall apart overnight. The head of the court system cannot be put on trial within that same system. It's a constitutional impossibility that creates an impossible situation. And this is why the conversation about abdication has moved from the fringes to the mainstream practically overnight. Polling among even strongly pro-monarchy audiences is showing roughly 3/4 of respondents saying Charles should step aside and hand the throne to William and Catherine, the one couple in this entire saga whose hands appear completely clean. William himself has reportedly been saying for 7 years, ever since that disastrous Newsnight interview, that Andrew needed to be permanently removed from royal life, just as he argued that Harry and Meghan needed to be distanced from the institution. For 7 years, Charles didn't listen, and now the consequences of that choice are bearing down on him with the full weight of 9 police investigations and the very real possibility of criminal proceedings that could reach into Buckingham Palace itself. This scandal has been hiding in plain sight for 15 years. The photographs of Andrew and Epstein in Central Park were published in 2011. The questions have been circulating ever since. And yet British law enforcement spent a decade and a half choosing not to investigate. Why? What did the security services know? What files exist within the palace? These are questions that are now being asked openly, and the answers could reshape not just the monarchy, but the relationship between the British state and its most powerful institution. We are watching something unfold that has no modern precedent. The last time a crisis of this magnitude hit the British crown was in the 1930s, when Edward VIII's sympathies and personal choices forced an abdication that changed the course of history. What happens next with Andrew, with Charles, and with the future of the throne itself is genuinely uncertain. But one thing is clear. The walls are closing in, and the institution that has survived world wars, political revolutions, and countless personal scandals is facing a test unlike anything it has encountered in living memory. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.